Sharing.
Aren't we doing our presentations?
Yeah, I'm going to do this the first half, and then we're doing presentations. That was the way we set it up. And as I've told Irene, I'm going to change something, and I hope it'll meet with your approval. All right, so where we stopped off in the high Middle Ages. I have a few more things to say, but I'm skipping ahead to the late Middle Ages because I've hinted that tragedy is on the horizon. And lo, it is. We're going to see the plague come pouring in to Europe. And it's going to come through two avenues, through the Black Sea. Genoa had the franchise to the Crimea and trading on this end of the Silk Road. And Venice had this. But they both, and I think Genoa bought it in first, they both bought in plague into Europe. And what a disaster. Rats on the ship, wild rats on the ship, fleas, fleas passed it on to humans, the domestic rats, round and round. And before knew it, huge tragedy. And we're going to talk more in detail about it. In England alone, 1.4 million died. In Florence, half of to 2/3 affected. And
wait, go back. So the fingers, is that buboes there or what?
No, that's just the terminal bacteria plugging up the vessels. The buboes are in the lymph nodes. And what happened was it went from being in the lymph nodes and in places in the body to going to the lung. And then it started being transmitted not by just rat fleas, but through the air, person to person. And that was the big jump. Here's a bubo. And by the way, when we worked on the Navajo reservation, we saw buboes. Prairie dogs carry the plague. And when we saw a bubo, we just gave them tetracycline, and that was the end of the story. So all they needed back then was a little tetracycline. And then burying the dead, and the church took a big hit. So the graph I showed you last week was the church losing influence, and it was their inability to protect against the plague that made them lose a lot of influence and credibility. Emphasize that this was worldwide pandemic. The drop in China was also documented. So that was then, and I could not. My show and tell is this historical moment that we're in now. It could be that 2020 in the future will be more remembered for a dramatic breakthrough in immunology and vaccination. So let's look at that. You've all been reading in the papers about the new vaccines. And what I want to emphasize, and we're going to see this in the next months to years, a public-private partnership. All we've heard about in this country is warp speed. But believe me, folks, there's a public-private partnership that's been going on for a long time. And I want to introduce you to the international context, international organizations, NGOs, pharma, and nations, which we've been hearing mostly about, are certainly in the mix, but there are civic organizations that are alive and well. And who are these civic organizations? Well, it's an alphabet soup. Gavi, WHO, and Seque. So, and leads to COVAX. Well, what the heck is all that? Gavi started in 1990, Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. Seque, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations. Bill Gates is involved prominently in both of these organizations. And COVAX is a little bit easier to remember. It's going to be the vaccination for COVID. But what it does is it looks and tries to ensure global access. So they're looking at this ethically. And how are we going to get the vaccine where it does the most good? Now, that's not always the question for nations, especially nations that say that they want their nation to be first. So here we are, Gavi. The World Health Organization obviously is in the mix. And this coalition for preparedness. Now, this coalition for preparedness was started in 2015. The inspiration of, I think mostly Bill Gates, we'll see, but Gates' involvement across the board here, if he doesn't get the Nobel Prize before some crazy conspiracy engulfs him in this. It's just insane that he's been accused of. In any case, they all form, as soon as we are faced with coronavirus, they look ahead and they say, oh, we've got to have there'll be an immunization. There's got to be a strategy. And look at this. The Coalition for Advanced Preparedness, Bill Gates, they were on to this notion of messenger mRNA very early. So 2015, the breakthrough that we see coming through in the first two successful trials, messenger RNA, that idea was promoted. We've been reading the literature, and folks, we should get going with this idea of messenger RNA, and more about that in a minute. But there's confusion. What's the difference between a vaccination and an immunization? It's process, and you can use both interchangeably. It doesn't matter, but technically, vaccine starts the thing. That's where you give it to the patient, and the immunization relies on the patient's immune system to finish the job. A small difference. So, Juan Jose, do you know where the word vaccine comes from?
No, sir, I do not.
Spanish word.
Vaca. And here I'm going on one of my history tangents, but I think it's an interesting story. So at Berkeley Castle, spelled the way we spell Berkeley, but in England it's produced Berkeley Castle. In the village at the foot of Berkeley Castle was a doctor named William Jenner. And he noticed that milkmaids never got smallpox. That's an interesting observation. But what they noted was that cows got some kind of strange pox. So vaca, that's where vaccination comes from. They noticed that cows got this strange pox, and the milkmaids, when exposed to it, got the same thing, but only on their hands. So in human beings, it didn't spread throughout the body. And so Jenner in 1796 got the idea, well, let's take some of this cowpox and and give it to humans intentionally. And that was the first smallpox vaccine. And it worked because humans never developed the full pox from cowpox, but it gave them immunity against the far worse smallpox. Now, this folks had tumbled to this a while before with the smallpox itself. And the theory was, if you took some of the smallpox from somebody who was really sick with it and had breathed it in and contracted it maybe through his lungs, and it went through his entire body, and that's what killed him. What if you took a little bit of that smallpox and deliberately put it into the skin of people? And that was risky because you were dealing with the actual smallpox thing itself, but it wasn't as bad as breathing it in, where it spread to the entire body. However, in about 5 to 10% of the people, you gave them the real smallpox in the skin, and before their immune system could fight it off, it made it to the lungs, and it did kill them. So there was a risk, and it came down to a calculation. We can try to prevent this at a 5 to 10% risk, but if we get it, we're likely to die from it. And if there's an epidemic nearby, people did this intentionally. Famously, Abigail Adams. So if you saw the HBO docudrama on John Adams, there was an episode where Abigail Adams, played by Laura Linney, does this herself. So we don't know. I misspelled Abigail. Sorry. We don't know. I don't know historically whether the HBO version or this version was the accurate one. So,
John, can I just interject something? I was delighted to learn from one of the articles, I think by Mukherjee, that vaccination in this manner is ancient in Indian and possibly also Chinese cultures, that there were traditionally old women who would collect material and vaccinate people.
Excellent. That's
thousands of years old.
Okay, and I should say, I should have said at the very beginning, Irene is a virologist. So I apologized in advance for any mistakes I make in this. And she has carte blanche to interrupt me anytime she can. Thank you, Irene. So the generic model for messenger RNA was appreciated by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness. And they tipped off Big Pharma. Hey, Big Pharma, we don't know if this is ever how soon this is going to be necessary, but we think in 2015, and then it really took off in 2017. We don't know for sure, but it could be that this technology will become useful someday in a quick vaccination. And so the theory was the generic lock and key. So this is a virus, and it's got an envelope, and it's got keys on it that have been by evolution derived to match the locks on cells of other organisms, including humans. So we have a receptor, which is a lock, and they've got the key. And so the coalition said, that would be an attractive target for creating antibodies. If you could create antibodies against viral keys, that would really help. And we think messenger RNA could play a role in this. The messenger RNA, this is a generic virus with its generic envelope. And the idea would be to get the genome, and we had the genome, by the way, in COVID by January 10th. The Chinese were very good at sharing that internationally. There is a community of international scientists that communicate with each other and are reasonable. So the national problems we're all very sad about, but the international scientific community carries on. Thank you very much. And Irene's among them. So they said if a pandemic comes, we would go into the RNA, or in some viral cases, DNA, and figure out what segment makes the envelope. And we would take that segment out and manipulate it. And I'll show you how they would manipulate it. And this is one of the heroes that probably is in line for a Nobel. She is working with BioNTech, which is the German firm that partnered, that did the preparation and research and partnered with Pfizer. So Pfizer was smart enough to pick a good partner, and she is the driving force. She herself is Hungarian, but she's been at this for 3 decades. So she realized in 1990 at the University of Wisconsin, they made this RNA technique work. But she said, hey, we can't stop now. And the problem was that the messenger RNA is made up of unstable nucleic acid. That's the substance of DNA and RNA. That's the basic building blocks. And it breaks down easily. You can't take it by mouth. It would break down in the stomach with stomach acid. It won't last very long circulating in the body by an injection because it degenerates. So the problem was how to get it to inside the cell. And it was too risky to have it outside the cell because the breakdown products might cause serious side effects. So BioNTech, I'm welcoming Carol. Carol told me she'd be late, so she is entering with full excuse. Hi, Carol. And so the solution at BioNTech was to take the messenger RNA and encapsulate it in a lipid. Let's just say it's like a fat, to protect it so it's not attacked by the body until it gets into a cell. But as you've heard, the problems with the BioNTech at Pfizer preparation is the cold chain. And I suspect it has to be kept so cold, minus 75 to 100, because of this lipid covering protecting the RNA. And that's probably what makes it much more expensive than the alternatives, which we'll see in just a second. Hello, Carol. And so now it's time to go from the generic to the real. Here is the damn envelope on COVID that we're so sick and tired of seeing. And it's called, it's got a nickname, the spike, right? It's the spike part of the capsule. And that is the target. It looks like it's important, and it's seen, and the immunization trials are showing that it is important. And so this is kind of complicated, and I do not expect people to get this the first time around, but you're going to hear this lecture again, maybe every 3 months or so, because this is going at warp speed. But here's a diagram, and I direct your attention to the lowest, So the idea, now that we know that it's COVID, we've got it, we've isolated the gene, and using advanced techniques, they quickly determined what part of the genome is the gene for the spike protein. And so they, once you know that, using the new technology that we have, monoclonal technology, you can create an awful lot of these things very cheaply and very quickly. So we have gotten to this point in less than a year. It took 20 years to develop the polio vaccine from beginning to end. So we have done this in less than a year. Hooray for the human race, right? So the virus is sneaky, and we're traveling more and we're more exposed, but we do have intelligence to deal with it. Now, not optimally, but we've got something going on. They didn't have any idea what was going on in the so-called Spanish flu 100 years ago, but we do. And so they've wrapped it in the fat, and they put it into the body, and they've discovered that enough of it gets into the cell. The cell unwraps the messenger RNA from the fatty cover, and we found that they just done an update. It's better than 90%. It's 94.5%. That just out yesterday. We're living history, folks. It's really quite exciting. But here's the problem: it's cold storage, and their products is going to be very expensive. And so the odds are against them being the dominant one. They're the first, and boy, oh boy, do they get credit for being first. But there's a second possibility, and I'll get to that. But who is doing messenger RNA? Well, we know it's Pfizer and BioNTech. They were first. Now we know about Moderna. They're second out. But there's another possibility, and that instead of wrapping it in a fat globule, they put it inside an innocent virus. And Johnson & Johnson's working on that. AstraZeneca at Oxford is working on that. They may be the next out of the block with some results. But look at this. So is Sputnik. The thing that Putin bragged about months ago is using this same technique. And who knows, they may have done it first, but they haven't shared enough data for anybody to believe them. And in the current political climate, nobody does. But stay tuned. They're all of a sudden in the running. And when they announced 90% effectiveness, people scoffed. But now we know that may be possible. So what's the idea with using a virus to carry it in? Instead of wrapping the RNA in fat globules, they put it inside of an innocent virus. And that innocent virus carries the messenger RNA into the cell, delivers it there. And just like in the other case, that cell all of a sudden is making the spike protein to cover itself with this information that has been snuck in and thrown into the gears of the cell. So it's a viral vector. So and this is much cheaper. The estimated cost right now for a immunization made using a viral vector, and if that's assuming AstraZeneca comes in with the same kind of good results that we've seen so far, they can make an immunization for $6. It's estimated that BioNTech, that's going to cost $60 a pop, so 10 times as much. Here we are. The viral vectors I've summarized again: the Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, and the Russians. And there's over 300 teams working on immunizations around the world. Here, we've got the RNA, people working on messenger RNA. And here we've got the vector, that's the viral vector. But there's a lot of people working on the old-fashioned way, which is taking the protein and grinding it up and just giving proteins into the, and this is the way a lot of immunizations that we've had and our children are getting is made that way. Others are working on playing with the virus and inactivating it, and that's what they did with the polio virus, and so on and so forth. So just to finish up this as quickly as possible, Seque tipped off Big Pharma. We've been following people like BioNTech. We think you need to look into it. Pfizer said, good idea. And nations come into it. And nations have been desperate for the last 10 months to get a vaccine. So nations said, hey, pharma, we'll give you some money to get you to go faster. Our economy is sinking. So an unprecedented amount of money has been thrown in the direction of big pharma. And big pharma has responded not just with research and getting the vaccine going, but they've been gearing up for the possibility of success, so that they've been putting up factories. Interestingly enough, many factories are put up in Switzerland and Belgium because they're small countries, and the pharmacies know that their governments don't need all that much, and that once they've got all the product, they'll be in control. They won't have any big government nationalizing their factory, right? And some nations have made a commitment to COVAX. So this is the international access that Gates and the World Health Organization and Gavi are so interested in. In particular, I think Britain was an early supporter of this public-private partnership, and China has last month announced it's in big, and that they'll take the responsibility for immunizing the Philippines, Cambodia, and a couple of other Southeast Asian countries. And in general, there's been international buy-in. America's been silent. Now, America's been very loud about something called an advanced market commitment. And that's where the nations have said, we're giving you a lot of money, but we want a promise that we'll get so many doses if your thing is successful. So nations started making bets. And the economists, God bless them, their graphics department did this, and I think it's absolutely stunning. So let's start with Pfizer and BioNTech. The United States put a relatively small bet on Pfizer. So here's all the bets the United States placed. And you see that most of their bet is with AstraZeneca. which as I told you, does the viral vector much cheaper, much more practical. You don't have the cold chain, right? For them, normal refrigeration can last for up to a month. So a huge advantage, and that's where the United States has put its bet. Moderna's not on this, and I've never been able to figure out why. I'm sure they'll update it soon. So COVAX, well, before I get to COVAX, India has put all their money into Novavax. EU is distributed their bet a little bit more evenly, as has Britain and Japan, smaller players. But COVAX, they've got money from governments and from philanthropies, and they've put most of their money in AstraZeneca, but a lot in GSK. And so I'm almost done here. Big Pharma has made a commitment to COVAX. So pharma has had a lot of relationships and made promises with nations, but Big Pharma is independent. They'll honor their advanced commitments, but they've also promised COVAX support. So who's in control of determining who gets immunized? It's all of these actors, and nobody can hijack it. As I said, Big Pharma has put their factories in a lot of them in Switzerland and Belgium. So nobody's going to bully them into saying where the immunizations go. And there's going to be a huge, huge ethical discussion, hopefully led by the World Health Organization, which we are going to rejoin, to decide how do we spread this around. And once we spread it around, UNICEF is going to implement and deliver the COVAX to the poor world, underdeveloped countries. Nations, of course, are developing their own domestic plans, and purportedly every state in the United States of America is developing their own plan of delivery and priorities. And interestingly enough, every group that has talked about priorities are in agreement that it is healthcare workers that are first in line, and that makes a certain amount of sense. Near the top are old people, which is debatable. Whether you can obviously save a lot of lives, but we'll see more ethical debates coming up on this. And then as far as nations are concerned, it's safety. And in our country, it's the FDA, and in Europe, it's the European Medical Authority. And WHO pretty much takes the word of the FDA and the Europe Medical Authority as to safety. So who doesn't get involved in that aspect of it? So this is interesting, my last slide. So you talk about equity, and you talk about these advanced market commitments, and how is that distributed? In other words, another kind of pejorative way of asking that is, how greedy are these countries in pursuing advanced market commitments? How, are they gobbling up and hoarding more than their share? And here's the tabulation. Very surprisingly to me, Canada has got more than 9 immunizations for every person in their country. So obviously, a lot of their bets are going to fail, but they've bet heavily, and they're hoping that enough of their bets will come through that they'll get enough. So they're taking a ninefold precautionary step. Australia second, Britain, and here's the United States. Interestingly, all these are Anglo-Saxon countries. And we'll talk about that as we talk about the aggressiveness of Anglo-Saxon countries when we get into the so-called age of discovery that degenerates into the age of colonialism. The EU is right here, Japan close behind. Oh, but look where COVAX is. Holy cow. They are so underfunded, and they don't even have commitment for one immunization, assuming all their bets paid off. So they're going to need some help. And where are we? The process has gone much quicker than ever before, because this is an unprecedented pandemic that we know we can do something about. There've been overlap. So clinical trials, you wait until the clinical trials are over and you get your safety data. But there's been, as soon as trials look possibly doable, they have ramped up production in advance, as they should have. So good for them. They've overlapped, and a lot of that'll be wasted money. But hey, you know, insurance that we get every year and we don't die is wasted money. And then we're about ready to go into emergency use as early as next week or the week after. And then there could be distribution by the end of the year on the 2 RNA products. And they're the ones that have been able to develop the quickest. It takes longer to grind up a lot of protein and create an immunization. If you isolate the RNA and you can turn it into messenger RNA, and you can duplicate it really quick. And that's why we've gone so fast, because of that dramatic breakthrough. And so I've talked enough today. It was a little over a half hour. Little Ico, yes.
China's already immunizing. What kind of method are they using?
We don't know. I don't know. I didn't run across it, but I'll report back to this group. As I said, I'm going to have to update this lecture, or at least parts of it, quite often. I think I want to hear show and tell for sure, but first I'll take any other questions about this. Oh, Irene, let me go to you first. We can't.
You're muted.
Now I'm not. Watch out.
Okay, a real virologist will now set you all straight.
About what? You did a great job. I thought it was really interesting how you put it all together. I want to, yeah, that was really nice overview. And I'm going to be on, you can also, don't you do the grand rounds, UCSF? I think it's a similar presentation today at noon.
Yeah, I've been very selective about it, and relying on people like you to tell me when I should watch the whole thing. So you've sent me there a couple of times, as has my good friend Mark Will.
Okay, good. Yeah. So yeah, those are delightful discussions when they get into the whole treatment and vaccination business. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what today's is, so whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to say that there are some long-term potential side effects of these various vaccines that are going to be really interesting to watch over the next years. So, and one of the downsides of the Oxford one, AstraZeneca Oxford one, potential downside that I came up against when I was developing a vaccine, it's not a vaccine, but a viral-based therapeutic for cancer, is that there can be these immune system responses that either block the potency initially or later, because so Oxford chose to stick the message for the spike protein into a chimpanzee developed adenovirus, which is smart because that adenovirus, like all adenovirus, goes for the lungs, great. And so it'll be expressed in the right context, but it's possible that the envelope will cause problems to the immune system that won't be evident right away. And the other comment that I wanted to make about the mRNA, which I loved and I'm sure you're aware of but didn't have time to highlight, is that Fauci's division, and specifically this one doctor as in PhD, Seque Corbett, I think her name is, has worked for a long time on SARS and SARS-1 and MERS, and they were very quick out of the box, which is why Moderna is so advanced. They knew the technology that worked for the MERS vaccine, which never had to be deployed because the MERS collapsed of its own weight, as diseases often do. But it also, I think, worked for Ebola, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
But
that's
anyway,
right. I think that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, so they could basically do a plug and play and go out the door. And I was just, yeah, I was really happy because Kazikia Corbett is also a product of one of my favorite projects in the world, which is called the Meyerhoff program, which is training people of color in science and technology and mathematics. And she's
Okay.
brilliant. So anyway, yay for her.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those comments. Thank you. And
Okay.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit more in detail and maybe put some of your stuff into my next presentation.
Yeah, it might be a deeper dive than most people need. But anyway, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, well, if you got any shallow dive stuff, send it to me.
My scuba snorkel.
Yeah, if you got any snorkel stuff, send it to me.
Right.
Okay, other questions? Okay, now it's time for show and tell. I hope Carol said she hadn't done her homework, and I hope she's remedied that.
She's in her car.
But I won't call on her first. Oh, is that still her car?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm still in the car because I kept dropping off when I was trying to race home. So I'm just parked, wait, so I can not drop in and out. And I didn't remedy it.
Okay,
I
well,
think the only person in Lafayette was like, I forgot her name. It's like, you already did the Lafayette side.
well,
But
no,
I had a question. I had an overriding question, like, who decides and who pays for these monuments that get put up?
Right.
who pays for what?
Yeah.
The
The
monument.
monuments, statues.
Oh,
So when they decide to put up these really expensive statues, who decides that they should do that? And is it just a local? It just must be local.
Very often. But yeah.
but I'm sure like some outside advocacy group comes to the city and with their thing, and the city takes that initiative and gives thumbs up or thumbs down, I suppose.
Yeah.
But they
Although-
must, like, Lafayette has an arts commission. So
Okay.
I would think that they would, something like that, you know, like who decided, like all the Confederate statues that, was it just the Ku Klux Klan decided to put them all up?
Well, they were in charge of the government, including
Yeah.
in my home state of Indiana in the 1920s, the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
My last time well, I've talked enough. Tomorrow, next time, I want to do a little show and tell on the Ku Klux Klan in Indianapolis.
I had no idea
Yeah.
Indiana was KKK. I had no idea.
Yeah, they're super conservative.
Wow.
I
Wow.
think you should do a program on how you escaped.
I think we need to make an anti-vaccine and distribute it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was going back to the vaccine. That was fascinating.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
so
really
much. I
good.
feel like I have such a better sense of,
Mhm, Me too.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, God bless the economists. You know, I read them faithfully, and I've been saving articles from them for the last 10 months. And so a lot of that came in handy. This is in fact being taped. So if anybody else wants to watch it, I'll send the link.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to take a photo of your chart with my phone. That'd be great just to have that.
Yeah, so you can run
I
that.
captured it. But it'll be in his YouTube, and then you can do a screenshot, Barb,
Yeah, yeah. you
on your
can-
computer.
So is that list because that's who could afford to shell out whatever money it was costing at the time?
For a statue? Yeah.
No, I'm back to the chart.
Are we talking about COVID or Lafayette?
Yeah, I'm
COVID.
back to the COVID chart. Like, you know, Bangladesh has nothing, and Canada has tons because they have a better healthcare system, and they're totally going to cover their people.
Well, and also,
but is that because they had the
I bet they're also counting on multiple doses, because originally there's a lot of literature saying that people didn't believe a vaccine would be a stable protection, that you might need
Right.
annual, or you might need monthly, or you might need whatever protection.
Yeah,
I'm
And then-
assuming that's why they would do multiple doses. But I also had a question about that. COVAX was on the chart, and I'm like, what's the population of COVAX?
so the COVAX, that number was calculated from all the undeveloped countries that
Ah.
just don't have any money
Yeah,
at all.
they can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And where do they get money at all from? I mean, is it?
I think they've got what they've got. They've got from philanthropy, right? Bill Gates, you know, he's been very active in Gavi. He's been very active in Seque, and I'm being a sexist. Bill and Melinda, who is a driving force.
Yes, she's behind him more than.
Yeah, I have a rich friend who donated a lot of money, so much money that he got invited up to Washington,
Wow.
and
Wow.
was one of the people in the room talking to the Gates Foundation people, and he came back and said, "It's Melinda. Melinda's driving it.
Wow.
Bill's the nerd, but she's the vision. She's got the
her,
vision.
her and his mother, because his mother said to him, if now you've been blessed with all this, use it for the benefit of the world.
That
And
is
so
great.
2 women in his life.
And I
Yeah.
felt special, and what his wife is really into getting women into science. and
Yeah.
and especially underprivileged women, getting them into science, bringing them
Yeah.
in, and, yeah, and mentoring them. And she's amazing. She's really
Yeah.
amazing.
So I want to put a couple of men back in the conversation.
How dare you?
I trust you'll approve of me putting Pope Francis and Joe Biden, who is Catholic, back
Yeah,
into the conversation,
yeah,
because I think COVAX is going to be very relevant for that conversation.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
it's going to lead to huge ethical things. The World Health Organization, God bless them, long suffering, will be in the conversation. And so far, China is the biggest donor. So let the competition begin. Between the nations and the philanthropists, who's going to be? It's like you donate to a building project and you buy a brick, or you give enough money, you get a plaque. Well, I think we're going to be seeing that the equivalent of COVAX initiative, rewarding folks that are going to pop. And it's kind of exciting, right? Because this is the first time we've ever attempted to immunize the whole world. The whole world.
Well, wait a minute, that's not quite true, because there's the polio project, and yeah.
But I'm talking about trying to do it instantaneously.
Oh yeah, yeah.
all at
In a
once.
pandemic, yeah.
all at once,
sure.
right?
Yeah. No, there's some very interesting stuff. A guy named Brilliant. Do you know him? So he's done a very interesting YouTube about the last case of smallpox and how the international development wiped that out. So yeah, sure, there have been other initiatives, but this is it's so important to immunize the whole world, because if we don't, it'll just keep popping up.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Brilliant's on TED Talks too. Remember?
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
TED Talks.
Yeah,
I can handle 17 minutes. And his name is spelled Brilliant.
yeah. I'll send the link.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Is his first name Larry?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw him interviewed, and it was we just looked at each other and went, wow, because he was kind of a hippie, and he wandered off to Nepal in the 80s and was caught there in an epidemic, and he and his wife just stayed. He had a medical background, and they just stayed. How can we go back home when the people are dying of smallpox? We got to get. There's a vaccine. We got to get everybody immunized.
Awesome.
Okay.
I think I have to go to UCSF.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you know how it is.
Bye,
Those-
Irene.
Okay. Now, wait, before you leave, next week is Thanksgiving.
Right.
So 2 weeks. We'll meet again. 2 weeks.
Awesome.
What about your presentation? Did you have a
I do, but you can't hear it yet.
But can we eventually? The
Oh, yeah.
question is.
Oh yeah, this isn't going to go away. I
Yeah.
learned a little bit of California history from doing this. Thank you, John, for the challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so in 2 weeks, Juan Jose, you understand next week is Dia de Gracias.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Agreed.
Okay.
And also Black Friday.
And thank the Spanish language for the word vaccine.
I will make sure to thank them.
Yeah, that was fascinating. I love that. I'll
Oh,
tell that
I
story
missed it.
after. Oh my God, Carol, I'll tell you. It's fascinating.
Okay,
If I can
Okay.
remember it by the time I talk to you next.
Okay.
okay, so Barbara will tell me, and then I will listen to the replay of the taping, and that way we'll know if she was accurate or she just made up. This is all about cows.
Right. I'll try to post it today instead of my usual dilly dally.
No, that's okay. Whenever you get there is fine. Thank
Carol,
you, though.
I love your screen. I'm trying to figure out what that is.
She says,
Well, it's because I dropped my phone so many times it shattered the
Oh my gosh.
glass, and it's like,
That's
so
funny.
it's all foggy.
Huh.
so did one
Okay.
want to prepare his presentation?
I
Yeah,
did.
I want to hear about. Oh, good. Do we get to hear it?
Sure. So I was supposed to do a presentation regarding the historical spots in Bogota. That's what I'm gonna do right now. You let me know when you can see the screen, please.
Yeah.
It's on.
Okay, so welcome to History 101. I'm gonna be the assistant today to Professor Mr. John.
Okay, go to full screen there. Go to slideshow.
You can
There.
make full screen.
There
John.
you go. You got it.
God, this is so fancy already.
Awesome. We got all our names.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Boy,
So the
wow.
first thing I
There.
want to talk about is Quinta Bolivar. So as you might
Please.
know, Simon Bolivar, who is the
Okay.
guy on the right side of the slide, is the Venezuelan, actually. He's the guy who united 5 countries in order to fight against the Spanish people and take them out of the continent. And he became like the first president of the whole Gran Colombia. That's how this big space of 5 countries was called La Gran Colombia, like the big Colombia. Eventually, it divided into Peru, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela, Peru, and ¿cuál otro más? Even just 4 countries. Panama. I'm sorry, and Panama, which eventually was taken from us thanks to the US. Thank you.
US.
A big shout out to the American people. So this is actually the house where he lived in for several years of his life. He lived there with his wife, and it's actually nowadays a museum. They still keep his bed, like all of the things that belong to him are actually there. And funniest
Wow.
story, around in the 90s, there was a illegal military group called LM. They got into this museum and they stole Simon Bolivar's sword, like in order to make a stand against the government. So yeah, that's a funny
Wow.
topic. The next one is also a house from a really important person who lived in this country. It's called Jorge Gaitan, who is the guy on the left and who is also on the bill, which has the less value in Colombia. This is the old bill. So he was really important because he actually had really great ideas. He was a liberal and he was fighting against the conservative team, and he was gonna win the elections. He was a candidate for the presidency, but he got shot like 3 months before the elections, and everyone went crazy, not only in Bogota, but also in all the country, and that's what it's called el Bogotazo. Everyone went crazy, and everyone from the liberal party thought the conservative party were the guilty ones, and there was like a civil war in the whole country. This was in 1945. And the 48, I'm sorry. And the last story is like Guatavita Lake. This is not mainly in Bogota, it's like 1 hour away in a town called Guatavita. So this lake, many years ago, was like a really sacred place for the muiscas. That's the in how indigenous people are called in this part of the country, muiscas. And they had this spiritual ceremony where they put all of golden stuff, everything they had with golden and beautiful rocks. They just put it in the water, like until the bottom of the lake, which is really deep, and they will just put it there in order to thank to the gods. So eventually, the word came to the Spanish that many, like there was many gold inside of that lake, and that's how the legend of El Dorado was born in this part of the country. And many people actually have died from the Spanish, yeah, from the Spanish people. They died trying to look for gold. They actually got to take a little bit, and nowadays many people still try to get into the lake to get something out of it, but it's legal, and I don't think they can get something out of it because it's really, really deep. And that will be all for today, people.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Very good.
Buenos
Thank
Aires.
you. All right. Beautiful. Well done.
Thank you.
Yes, you set a very high standard though. So Barb, I think we're gonna have to put away our color crayons because I'm not gonna work so well.
Yeah.
We're
And
not gonna impress anybody.
Oh my
How
God.
about you, Barb?
About a presentation? Not quite yet. I'm not quite ready.
Okay. Well, we'll have plenty of opportunity.
Really, I'll start thinking about what I want to present. I could present on Buddha statues.
Oh,
See,
that,
I have about 32 of them.
Yeah, it'll be the Buddha in your backyard.
cool. Cool.
Anyway, I'm kidding. Okay,
Well,
thank you so much, everyone.
Oh,
Girl?
okay. And as we sign off, I want to apologize on behalf of all of us for Panama.
Oh, can I show mine?
Agree.
Oh,
are you
yes.
ready, Michael?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oops. Oh, everybody's gone. Is
No,
everybody?
I'm not gone, but I don't know something
I'm here.
happened.
Okay, I'm sharing. Here it is. Do you know what that is?
It's a woman. Let me get my glasses on. I could tell by the hands, and it's a woman with. Tell us where it is first.
San Francisco, Union
Oh.
Square.
Okay. Oh
San
my God.
Francisco Union Square. And
Okay.
that statue was modeled by Alma Spreckels. Alma Spreckels married a very, very old rich man. And he had the Spreckle sugar fortune. And he was like, 18, 19, 20, when they wanted a model for this statue, and she volunteered, and she was 6 foot tall. She's
Wow.
very tall and charming, and he fell in love with her. She got him to fall in love with her. And so here she is on top of the statue, and this is what she looks like. And she became quite a patron of San Francisco. She started the Legion of Honor. And she gave his fortune basically to fund the Legion of Honor. Juan Jose, this is a museum in San Francisco, and she bought up everything that was artistic in Europe, from Rodin's to paintings, Rodin statues to paintings and everything. But I have a special place in my heart for this family because my grandfather came to the United States in the early 1900s, and he worked for the Spreckels family.
Mm.
And he was what you call a houseboy. He did all these things, grocery shopping and stuff like this. And I'm not sure he worked for Alma. I think he worked for her husband when he was a younger man, before he had married her. And he was pretty old when he married her, and he had syphilis, but fortunately he had 3rd stage syphilis, and that's not communicable, and so she didn't get it. But I asked my mother, well, didn't you have a hard time in the Depression? And she says, no, we live with these rich people.
Oh,
And so they had plenty of money, and so there was no problem with the Depression. And so anyway, I thought it was really interesting that connection with this family. And there's a book called Big Alma that tells her whole story, her family life.
So do you know how your grandfather ended up met the Spreckles? Because
How did he end up with the Spreckles?
no, how did he meet him to begin with?
Oh,
'Cause that's pretty.
I have no idea. He came to this country, and my mother said he was really, really good with math. Like he could sit there and, say, oh, well, this bill is, blah, 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 count it up, and then say, oh, $20.56 or something like this. And so I guess that's how he got the job. 'Cause
Wow.
he was very smart, I guess.
Well, and Japanese were very good with horticulture. I think part of it is cultural, and the Japanese farmers really took over the San Joaquin Valley in the 1910s, 1920s, and of course they lost a fortune.
yeah.
The land was confiscated. Aiko and I saw a really interesting play, the Mashioka sisters, right?
Yokas.
And
Yeah.
about that whole era. But I think Japanese gardeners had no problems getting a job, and I would imagine that their reputation preceded them, and they were doing well. By the time your grandfather got it, they hadn't probably made it to the valley, but it wasn't very long after that they did.
Well,
Yeah.
Did your grandfather come from the Hiroshima area?
Yes.
Guys, I've
Oh,
got it.
no.
Yeah.
My mother's side was Nara. My father's side was Hiroshima.
See you in
But
2 weeks.
Really?
I'll let you guys continue. I love that statue. She looks like a total character.
She is. She is.
Okay, I'm gonna let you guys go. I have to go. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Hey,
Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
yeah,
Bye.
that
you.
is fascinating.
Take
Okay,
care. Thank you for everything, you guys. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
you
you
have a
too,
nice
Juan Jose.
weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
Bueno.
bye.
buena dia de gracia.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.
Okay, I'll
Bye,
check out. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's really
Carol,
interesting.
do you have a minute?
Okay.
Do you have a
Yeah.
minute? How did your
I do.
grandparents come to this country?
So both sides of my family came from Hiroshima.
Oh, they
Um,
did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
And I don't know where. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know where either.
Well, actually, I have a street address for where my maternal grandmother, her family home was. So I've done all this research. I have a scroll that is a family history scroll that the family's lore was that this was their whole family history, but it turns out I had it translated, and it's like the Cliff Notes version of it. So it's really interesting because it's the guy who translated it said it's kind of idiosyncratic in the way that the vernacular, but so my paternal side I don't know, but except that they came from Hiroshima because I have some paperwork from them. But my maternal side, that great grandfather came over and worked for he was a draftsman for an American company in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of unusual. And then he they had known, I'm pretty sure from the wedding pictures that I have from Japan,
Mhm.
is they married her, they knew each
We can't
other,
hear you.
came. Oh, now is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so she came over to marry my grandfather, and this was really interesting because they came through Angel Island, but she didn't actually stop at Angel Island because she had enough money, and he had already been here, so he did all the paperwork. So
Oh,
there's all this different class things that happened. So she ended up not getting stuck on Angel Island for any time. She came straight into San Francisco, and
what year did your grandfather come, and what?
I don't really remember. I think it was probably 19, oh, let's see, must have been 1910s, 1915, something like that. Long,
Mhm.
somewhere around, and shortly before. No, he must have come before that. He must have come early. I have to go and look, Aiko. This is really good. I had it down, but I don't have it in front of me. So late 1800s, early 1900s.
Uh-huh. Yeah, about the
Is
same.
that when your great grandparents? Yeah. So something happened in Hiroshima. I think there was a big crop failure because a lot of people came at that time from that area. And
Uh-huh.
my translator was saying that people who came from Hiroshima came mostly to the San Francisco area. And if they came from a different part of Japan, they ended up in Washington State.
Oh,
Um,
really? Huh.
so it's very regional because if they knew somebody, I think that's what brought
Yeah.
them.
Just like all immigrants, they like to go where
Yeah, where they already
the
knew
village
somebody.
is already established a foothold in the new
Yeah.
country.
Well,
Huh.
your family must be really interesting because for your mother to have studied martial arts and to be an archer that's like unusual.
Well, that was high school, because she went back to Japan because her mother was dying, and so she and her brother and mother were sent back because
Oh, really?
grandfather couldn't take care of all of them, because he was working for the Spreckles
For the
family.
Spreckles.
Yeah,
Oh, they got sent back to Japan. So
yeah.
what year was that?
Oh, geez. My mother was about 5. She was born in 1914. So it was about
Okay,
1919 or so. And
so
she grew
that
up
was
in Japan, basically, and came back here before the war. So, she had real
right.
divided conflicts. She thought she was going to end up after her father died in the 30s. She thought,
Oh,
he brought his ashes back to Japan, and then she came back, but she thought she would go back, because no
ah,
more parent here, and
yeah.
yet the war broke out, and then she got caught, you know.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, actually,
so
that's not quite right because she ended up staying for a little while, going to school and that kind of stuff, But
uh-huh.
she thought she would probably go back to Japan and maybe get a husband and all that kind of stuff. But, then the war broke out. And so she ended up staying. And my father, the same thing, It's funny that the two of them got together because he was sent back to Japan too.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, because his grandfather came to America, grabbed the 3 oldest boys and took them home to his wife, who probably would like to have bonked him on the head to make her raise 3 grandsons. I would have bonked Johnny on the head if he made
Wow.
raise 3 grandsons. And she kept them until they were all 18, but then 2 of them died. And
Oh,
so my father
was
was
there like a some kind of epidemic or something?
TB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so,
So they died in Japan.
yeah. And so my father came back, and then of course he had other brothers and sisters, who got raised here. So he felt really, dissociated from the family because
Oh,
they were
yeah,
Nisei, they were true Niseis, who grew up
yeah.
in this country, born in this country. My father was born in this country, but raised in Japan. So he felt
Right.
really like a fish out of water, But
So did he get,
go
when
ahead.
they put them in camp, did they put him in the same camp with the rest of his family?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was not a real political person. He worked for the Salvation Army. He was a Salvation
Oh,
Army officer. And so, he was a do-gooder instead of a politician.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So
Mm,
anyway, I mean, all those, that first, especially the first and some of the second generation had a hard time,
yeah.
Did you
Well, it
read
was
that,
tough.
the Hotel of Bitter and Sweet or something like that? That was about the story that occurred in Seattle, and it's written actually by a Chinese guy.
No, I
Yeah,
haven't heard of that.
Hotel of Bitter and Sweet, or
Okay, I'm gonna look for that.
and it's Jamie, I forget his last name now. But anyway, it's about the Seattle Japanese and the Chinese as well.
Right.
But I didn't realize that they came from different areas than, say, the ones that were in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's oh, that is I want to talk to you more about this. This is really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
It is. Thank you for letting me eavesdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're willing to tell us all about Indianapolis, which is a land unto itself, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, I'd better get on that. I got some interesting pictures.
Oh, really? Oh, that would be. So I'm reading. I just finished Heather Cox Richardson's book about how the South won the Civil War. That is a depressing book, man, but it's really interesting.
Yeah. What's the title is How the South Won the Civil War?
Yeah, and they really how much they control because all of the concessions that were made to bring the southern states back into the Union, and the Klan was really strong.
Yeah.
So I mean, and the fact that Montana, places like Montana or Arkansas have as much, their senators have as much, they don't represent very many people. And even with the representatives, they don't represent nearly the number